Welcome back to K-Chat with me, your host, Kayla Morales. Welcome back to another intro video with me. I did it again. Yeah, you're gonna need another pen and paper because this episode, 2 chef's kiss, okay? 2. I chat with Stefanie Adler. She's a women's health specialist, a nutritionist, and so many other things. She's incredible. And I chat with her about women's health, hormones, what else? Periods, menstrual cycles, so if you don't like the word period, fertility. We talk about literally everything. Oh, and we chat about cycle syncing too, which I love learning about. And we talk about gut health. So really, this is a great episode to listen to if you're a woman. And even if you're not a woman, it's a great episode to listen to because you just learn about how magical women truly are. Like everything that's going on in our bodies, it's crazy to learn about. It's beautiful, honestly. And yeah, I hope you all enjoy this episode. I'm telling you, you'll need a pen and paper because it's so good and filled with information for you guys. Also, I just want to say thank you so much if you submitted a question to me. This outline was primarily your questions. And so I appreciated all of them. And it also made me realize just how many women are having questions about their health. And I'm just really grateful and honored to be able to spread this message to you guys. And I really genuinely hope it helps you in your journey. And yeah, I just feel great that you guys trusted me with your questions. So especially about your health. So thank you. I really appreciate you all. I'd love to hear what you think about it. So be sure to leave a comment. If you're watching on YouTube, like it, subscribe. If you're listening to it on the podcast, rate, review, do all the things, help a girl out. And yeah, let me know your thoughts. I want to know if you like this sort of episode. If it resonated with you, I'm sure it will. And yeah, all right, I'll see you guys on the other side. Bye. Today's guest is a holistic nutritionist, a natural chef, a wellness coach, birth doula, and women's health specialist. And I'm so excited to dive into this conversation about periods, hormones, and so much more. So let's welcome Stefanie Adler to the podcast.
Hi, Kayla. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. And you know what? I feel like the women in my life are very excited to have you as well. And obviously we're women, but I just feel really passionate about the women in my life. So to share this kind of conversation that can help them with their health means a lot to me. So I really appreciate you. I'm so happy you're here. So thank you.
Awesome. Can't wait.
All right. So let's just start with what led you down this path? How did you get here and into this work?
Yeah. So when I was a kid, as long as my mom can remember, I can remember, I was really sick. I had a lot of stomach issues and was just constantly in pain and anxious and miserable. And I spent years going in and out of doctors' offices trying to figure out what was wrong with me. Left with really no real answers except for try these medicines. The medicines would either work for a couple weeks and then stop working, or the side effects would be miserable. And I just kind of felt really lost for most of my childhood and early adolescence. And then around the time I was 12 or 13, we found out about this thing called gluten. It's so funny now that would be something that not everyone knew about, but they did.
I kind of remember the first time I heard about gluten too. I was like, what is this? And I was around that age as well. So that's funny, but continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. And like my aunt had a friend who went off of it, and it like totally changed her life. And the doctors had tested me for celiac disease, but I wasn't celiac. And so they were like, that's not going to help you. And at that point, I was just like so desperate for anything to work, right? Like I just wanted to feel good in my body for like one day, that I was like, I'll do it. And like, this is at the time when, first of all, I'm from the South, I'm from Atlanta. And so like my mom, bless her heart, doesn't know how to cook like gluten-free, right? Like everything was coated in flour.
Yeah.
And, you know, also we're Jewish. So then there's like the whole like other component of like challah and kugel and like all of that. It was just like the worst of both worlds for me. So it was like this one aisle at Whole Foods that was like gluten-free section. And anyway, so I just like went for it. And within 3 months, symptoms I'd been having for 13 years went away.
Wow.
And I was just like super aware of the relationship between food and a catalyst for dis-ease in the body, or as a avenue for medicine, right? To make us feel better. And so fast forward, you know, another several years, I went to college and my mom was like, you should become a nutritionist. And like any 18-year-old was like, I can't listen to what my mom says, you know?
Yeah.
So I went abroad, got a degree in conflict resolution, which I do think helps my coaching, but still kind of it was fun to learn about, whatever. And when I came back to the States to start working in that, was like, no, my passion is really in nutrition. And so then was like, Mom, you're right. School for nutrition. And through that process, I went through like a whole hormone journey, which is another story that we'll probably get into when we talk more about birth control and everything like that.
Yeah.
And really came to find like my passion in the women's health space. Have always been super interested in nutrition for women, because I think so much of the medical system dismisses us too frequently. And like I had that experience for years of just being told like, you're an anxious kid, like that's where all your problems are coming from, like you're a young woman, like you need to like just stop being so anxious, like you're worried about boys. Like that's not what was going on.
Yeah. Wow. That's tough. But I mean, I always find it so interesting. Most of the guests that I've had on has had like, I don't know, like little pieces of like their like, I guess like purpose kind of sprinkled into their like journey. And I just love hearing about that. And to have the willpower to cut out gluten when you're 13 is like, oh my gosh, good for you. That's crazy.
Yeah, I've been doing this for so long now that it just feels like second nature, but at the time it was not easy.
Yeah. Props to you. That's great that you could have healed yourself. So for today's episode, typically I normally write the outlines on my own. I was lucky enough to have so many questions from friends and followers. So I really want to get into it. It's going to be such a juicy conversation. So I'm excited. But let's start on the importance of gut health, because I think a lot of the questions I have, I think a lot more than we typically think is contributed to our gut. So, I mean, I'd love for you to get into it.
Totally. I mean, it's hard to stress how important gut health is, because it truly is everything. It's like, you know, even Hippocrates, like thousands of years ago, said that all disease begins in the gut. And it's so true. And we just have come, you know, now we've come back to that, right? Like there is this like returning renaissance, but I mean, the gut controls, when I say the gut, first of all, we're talking about two different things. So first, we're talking about bacteria, right? Like that's what people, like when you hear like probiotics, everyone's talking about gut bacteria.
Yeah.
And like, don't think about this at night when you're like laying in your bed, because it's kind of creepy if you're like alone, but there are 3 pounds of gut bacteria that just exist in your intestine that are using you as a host. Okay. Like 3 pounds. That's a lot.
Yeah. I heard you speak about it. I watched another program you were teaching, and I heard you say that, and I was like, oh my gosh. Like I'm just picturing like 3 pounds of like little guys like walking around. I'm sorry, continue. Yeah.
But like, you know, I don't know if you've ever done like an arms workout with like a 3-pound dumbbell, like it gets heavy, like not light.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are billions and billions of microbes that live in your intestines. And like, we have evolved over thousands of years to live in synergy with them. And our modern lifestyle no longer is so synergistic with them. Yeah, exactly. So when I'm talking about gut health, we're talking about the community of living beings that live and exist inside you. And then we're also talking about the intestine wall, the intestinal lining. Okay. So there are a bunch of epithelial cells that make up the wall of your intestine, and they're supposed to be super, super tight together, have these really tight junctions, kind of like that. Okay. And what happens over time when we're exposed to foods that our body doesn't like, when we're stressed out, when we're exposed to toxins, when things like this happen, what ends up happening is that those really tight junctions get a little bit less tight and they develop these holes. And food particles, toxins, pathogens, etc., can leak out of them. And that's when we get leaky gut. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So like when people talk about bone broth, when they're like, oh, I'm doing bone broth for my gut health, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about like sealing up that intestinal lining.
Nice. See, I drink it and I've heard of leaky gut, but I've never had such a good, clear visual. Cool.
And it's problematic because like, this is how we end up with sensitivities, with autoimmune disease, with issues maintaining our weight, whatever it is, because things that are not supposed to leave our intestinal, our digestive tract, that are supposed to come out one end and leave the other without touching any other part of the body, end up sneaking through, and our body has immune reactions to them.
I see. And
as women, this is exceptionally important because 80% of all people with autoimmune diseases are women. Something about that is like a little weird. There's one, the like estrogen component, but also because estrogen lives in our gut, we can talk more about that, when we talk about hormones. But basically there's like this big gut hormone, leaky gut, autoimmune connection. And so gut health is super important for women so that one, we can protect ourselves from autoimmune disease, two, so that we can not have anxiety, not have depression. I mean, this is being studied at MIT and Harvard, that like bipolar disorder and schizophrenia are diseases of the gut.
Yeah, that's wild to think about, but also cool that we could start looking at the gut for assistance in those areas. My next question was, which you, I guess, sort of answered to, is that how does our gut health affect our hormones?
Totally. So my favorite catchphrase is pooping problems become period problems. And so many ways that our gut health affects our hormones. One of the biggest ways that I see most frequently in my practice is when people are constipated, when women are constipated, which is pretty common. And just like a news flash, you can still be constipated and poop every day, and you can have diarrhea and be constipated. And that usually, sometimes that's even what's actually happening. It's very interesting. But basically, if you are constipated, what's happening inside your body is your body makes estrogen every day. Okay. It's like, wake up, make estrogen. It uses that estrogen, it recycles it through the liver, it sends it back through the bile to your intestines to be excreted out through your bowel movements. If you don't have a bowel movement every day, or if that bowel movement is like staying in your body longer than 24 hours, what ends up happening is you reabsorb that estrogen and you use it again. And so if you don't go to the bathroom every day, you have a couple days worth of estrogen floating around in your system, which can lead to endometriosis, heavier painful periods, hormonal acne, PMS, so many hormonal issues.
Wow. Okay. I had no idea. I literally had no idea.
It's pretty wild. And basically there's also, if you'll like indulge me nerding out for a second, but basically there's like in our gut, there's a community of like, so imagine like all these like gut microbiome, bacteria, imagine them as like little colonies. Okay. And like there's a colony that is called the estrobolome, and that colony is responsible for metabolizing and detoxing estrogen. Okay. If your gut bacteria is out of balance, then oftentimes that colony, the estrobolome, doesn't do its job properly. And then that's another way that you could have not enough or too much estrogen recycling through your body. And like this I find really interesting, especially as women tend to lead into like later in life, because estrogen dominant cancers are very common. So like ovarian cancer, breast cancer, cervical cancer, all of those are high estrogen cancers. And so oftentimes what happens is like, if your gut health is not right, then you'll end up with too much estrogen, which can lead to a cancer situation as well.
Down the line. Wow. How does this all affect us emotionally? Like gut health, how does, like anxiety and stuff?
So several different ways. Those gut microbes, all of those different colonies, there are some like species of bacteria that have been shown to reduce anxiety, reduce depression. Others that, you know, if we have too much of Candida, for example, which is like a yeasty bacteria, if we have an overgrowth of it, it can lead to anxiety or depression. Having that leaky gut can lead to anxiety and depression. And on the hormonal side, if you have too much estrogen, so estrogen and progesterone are two of your main reproductive hormones, okay? And we call it hormone balance because there's like a leveling scale, right, that they're supposed to have with each other. And if you have too much estrogen, which I just talked through some of the ways that are really common that women have too much estrogen, what ends up happening is by default, you don't have enough progesterone. Okay. And progesterone, when we have enough of her and when she's in balance, is like the grandma who comes to stay, who like rubs your back at night before you go to sleep, and who makes you feel safe and like not anxious and like you just like want to bake cookies with. But when she's out of balance, you're like insomniac, super anxious, feeling PMSy mood swings all over the place. And so if again, we have like situations in which we have too much estrogen, then we're not going to have enough progesterone, which will lead to increased anxiety around our period.
Wow. Okay. So, this is a question just randomly, but how many people in your practice do you see have issues with gut health? Probably like
98%.
Yeah. I was going to say like most people. Yeah, because everything you're listing, I'm like, this is more than I thought would have to do with my gut. But okay, that's good to know.
And it's so interesting because I just want to say this, if anyone's listening and is like, I don't have any like, you know, I go to the bathroom regularly. I'm not bloated. I don't have, you know, uncomfortable like gas, anything like that. Like I don't have any digestive symptoms. My gut health is fine. One of my current clients actually had 0 digestive symptoms and was having immune issues and went to, you know, work with a naturopath before was working with me and was found to have like one of the worst cases of leaky gut he had ever seen. Dang. And so like sometimes leaky gut won't also always manifest in digestive issues. And it can look like, you know, anxiety. It can look like immune disorders. It can look like so many other things. So if you're listening to this, like don't fully exclude yourself. And I kind of have like a checklist on like, how do you know if your gut needs help? And so, you know, some of the things on that checklist are like, do you drink tap water? Have you ever taken a round of antibiotics and then not done a gut healing protocol afterwards? Have you ever taken oral contraceptive pills? You know, so it can be like broader, and I want everyone to just like know that because it's totally common for people to have gut issues, but it's not normal.
Yeah, that's definitely good to know, especially since it's affecting so much of our lives. 3 pounds bacteria. Just can't. Okay, I want to talk about, so you mentioned hormonal acne and oral contraceptives. Let's start with hormonal acne and talk about how some ways to get rid of that and how, I don't know if it ties in with gut health. I'm sure it does, but.
Totally. Yeah. So a couple things with hormonal acne. One, it's really helpful if someone comes to me and like kind of has an idea of when in their cycle they break out. So that can tell us a little bit more about hormonally what's going on. So if you break out, for example, mid-cycle, that tells me, you know, around ovulation, that tells me something different than if you are breaking out, you know, right the week before you get your period. And so one of my best tips for anyone who's listening who feels like they have hormonal acne is like over the course of a month, just keep a little journal about like when your acne is flaring up and when it's calming down, because it's going to change how you address your hormonal acne. But one thing that everyone can do is really support the liver. So anytime we see something on the skin, whether it's hormonal or coming from the gut, et cetera, it's telling us that the liver needs support. Because if the liver and the gut were able to detox everything on their own, then it wouldn't need to come out through the skin. So supporting your liver, and I don't mean like do a juice cleanse.
Yeah, I was going to say, how can we support it?
Yeah. So one homeopathic practice that I love recommending to people is castor oil packs. So it's essentially like making a heating pad, but with castor oil, and it really stimulates the liver and helps the liver like get into gear and start detoxing.
Where do you place it?
So you just like under your ribs,
Okay.
like where your liver is, and you kind of lay with it like a heating pad.
Nice.
And castor oil packs are awesome. You can use them for so many other things too. Like,
I'm going to write that down. I haven't heard of castor oil packs actually.
Yeah, it's a fun one. And you can either buy on Amazon like a pack that's like everything you need to make your own castor oil pack, and it's all put together, or you can just go buy castor oil and like a piece of flannel, and you can kind of DIY it.
Yeah, nice. All right, thanks for sharing that one.
Lots of liquid. The solution to pollution is dilution. So,
ooh, okay, I like that.
I like to come up with things that are like catchy for people to remember.
Yeah.
What was that again?
Okay, yeah.
So lots of liquids. And then one thing that I work with a lot of my clients on, and it's a big focus in one of my group programs called the Well Woman Collective, is there are two phases of liver detox. Okay. So there's phase one, which, like, if we imagine the liver kind of like a post office. Okay. Phase one is like all of the packages like being sent to the main hub, to the post office. It's like everything coming in. And so phase one are things like when people do juice cleanses, for example, that's all usually phase one. The thing with phase one though is negative things also enact phase one. So like if you're exposed to a toxin, that sets phase one off. And what it does is it creates like these little free radicals. And those are like free radicals are kind of going around wreaking havoc until they get to the post office. Okay.
Okay.
When they get to the post office, phase two is supposed to happen. And phase two essentially like converts them to a more digestible, detoxable form so that they can be like excreted and let out of the body. Most people are really lacking in phase two nutrients. And so what ends up happening is then the free radicals just like go back out and like start wreaking havoc everywhere again. And so with like one, for example, and then you look at the list of like what is phase two supportive foods, it's like liver, like actual eating liver.
Oh, okay.
Like animal protein, garlic, onions, but like more, it's not like what you expect when you think of like a cleanse, right? And so I'll often see women who don't eat enough protein and they're deficient in phase two. And so they're doing all of this detox, they think, for phase one for the liver, but it's really not helping. So really like liver is one of my favorite foods for women for so many reasons. And so if you're not already like a pate fan, I highly recommend like trying it out.
Yeah, I've never tried it, I don't think so.
We gotta get to the liver.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever tried liver at all. Thank you for that. That was helpful, that visual of the post office. What are some tips for PCOS? Yeah, I know this is like a big one too. Yeah,
totally. Well, the reason I have that reaction is because I work with PCOS every day, all day, like, and it's actually not that complicated, but there are 4 different types of PCOS.
Oh, okay.
And so the reason why it's hard to give like a blanket statement is because, at least in my practice, I really want to focus on why. Like, why do you have PCOS in the first place?
Yeah.
So we're not just like throwing the whole kitchen sink at it. And we're able to really get to the root of what's going on and address that. But so basically out of the 4 kinds, there's the first one, which is insulin resistant based PCOS. And like an average of 70% of people with PCOS have that type.
Okay.
Which is a lot.
Yeah.
And then there's post-pill PCOS. So being on an oral contraceptive can give you PCOS. And then if you didn't have any irregular periods So for example, if you like went on the pill and didn't have irregular periods before the pill, but then you did after, you're probably post-pill PCOS. Not always, but probably. And then there's the other two, which are inflammation-based PCOS and adrenal-based PCOS. Adrenal-based PCOS, like 10% of people probably have, and then maybe let's say 20% of people are inflammation-based. So depending on what type you are, you either really want to focus on managing your blood sugar. You really want to focus on detoxing your body from being on the pill and returning to that natural hormonal balance. You want to reduce inflammation, and you really want to support your adrenals. So if you're like, I don't know what category I'm in, all of those things are like definitely what you should be focusing on. And if you can identify based on lab markers, symptoms, etc., one or two of those categories that you fall into, because it's possible to fall into more than one, then you kind of can like take from those buckets of like, okay, I'm not going to eat any naked carbs, which is when you have, so like if you eat a banana for a snack, for example,
to add like almond butter or something.
Exactly. Yeah, you got it, girl.
I think I got it from you, which is even funnier, but yeah.
Yeah, so that's like one really easy thing that like people just can start incorporating that's going to really protect your blood sugar and really going to support, balancing out your blood sugar. You can avoid inflammatory foods. You can introduce a lot of omega-3 anti-inflammatory foods. You can take ashwagandha to support your adrenals. Like there's a lot of different things that you can do depending on the type. But the best thing that you can do is actually get to the root cause of it. And so anyone here who has PCOS and is like, I don't want to live like this anymore.
Yeah.
Either work with a practitioner or do your research and like go and advocate for yourself to get testing done so that you can identify what the root cause of your PCOS is.
Yeah. I would love to go back and talk about birth control or oral contraceptives and discuss first how it affects, I think it also affects your gut, right? I have always been really terrified of like birth control, so I'm just not sure, but I think it does affect your gut. I would love to talk about how it affects your gut and then how to regulate your hormones after you're off birth control and kind of get things on the roll.
So the oral contraceptive pill impacts your gut a lot. We don't fully know all of the ways in which it's possible that it does, but what we do understand, remember going back to that colony, the shovelome.
Yeah.
So if you are taking estrogen orally every day, which is essentially what you're doing if you're on the oral contraceptive pill, we know that that is having a reaction with that colony and potentially negatively affecting the way that your body detoxes and metabolizes estrogen. It's impacting that gut bacteria.
Yeah, so you might deal with that like estrogen being recycled and stuff again. Okay.
And you're already being overloaded with estrogen. And so it's basically just creating more dysbiosis, more of an imbalance of that gut bacteria, and which can lead to a variety of different issues. There's even studies that have come out, and it's going to bother me that I can't remember the exact numbers right now, but it's women that have been on the oral contraceptive pill for longer than 6 years, I think have like a 3 times increased risk. We'll want to fact check that exact number, but I'm pretty sure it's at least 3 times increased risk of getting Crohn's disease, which is an autoimmune disease of the gut. Irritable bowel disease is what that is. So
wow.
Definitely has like some pretty severe impact. Also, one other way that we know is oftentimes women who are on the oral contraceptive pill get frequent yeast infections or UTIs. And basically your vagina has a microbiome just like your gut, and they're connected. And so what we know is that women are more likely to get candida overgrowth, yeast overgrowth in their gut when they take oral contraceptives, and that translates to the microbiome of their vagina as well.
Okay. Thank you for that. How do you then kind of get yourself back on track after being on birth control for a number of years?
Yeah. So several different ways. Supporting the liver is like number one important thing. So we talked about a few of those strategies, but really making sure that your liver is supported, really supporting all of the other systems that your body needs for your hormones to get back on track. So that's sleeping 7 to 9 hours a night, and like making sure that you're asleep if possible during hormone hours. So in Chinese medicine, there are different hours that are connected to different systems in the body. So like, for
Ooh.
example, 1 to 3 a.m. are liver hours.
Okay.
So like, you should be asleep for liver hours for your body, for your liver to be able to regenerate and do what it's supposed to do. Hormone hours are 9 to 11. And so any hour, the way I like to describe it is like any hour of sleep before midnight is equivalent to 2 hours of sleep afterwards in terms of rejuvenating your body. And so like, I'm a huge advocate for like, get in bed at 9:30, get to sleep and like be asleep for some of those hormone hours. And then really eating a diet that supports, I mean, when you get off the pill, like people have different, it's complicated because if you got on birth control because you had hormonal issues, those hormonal issues aren't going to go away. They are just going to get worse while you're on the pill. They're just being covered up. So if you come off the pill, like, and you want to balance your hormones, we need to balance what was originally wrong, right?
Yeah.
As a part of getting off the pill. But let's say you had no hormonal issues, you got on the pill and you come off and things are a little wonky and you're breaking out or your period's missing. Then in that circumstance, it's usually a high estrogen situation. And we really just like want to support the body's estrogen metabolism as much as possible by cleaning up the liver, supporting it with liver supportive foods, but also estrogen metabolizing foods like cooked cruciferous veggies, raw carrots, things like that, supporting the gut health so that you can get all of that stuff out at the right time. Nice. But yeah, like if you went on the pill because you had PCOS, you got to address the PCOS, right?
Yeah. Go back to the root. Does it, how can one regulate their hormones after pregnancy?
It's a good question.
I've never even thought about this, to be honest, but it's interesting to think about. Yeah. I didn't think of it.
So the biggest thing you can do is just be patient and gentle with yourself because there's a lot going on. If you're breastfeeding, like that's going to be like dramatically impacting what's going on hormonally for you. And every woman's experience post-birth is going to be different. The best way that you can regulate your hormones after birth is eating a whole foods based diet and like getting adequate protein, controlling your blood sugar, and really making sure that you're sleeping as much as possible. I mean, it's hard when you're, you know, you've got a newborn, but like really just taking care of all of your other systems so that when it's time for your cycle to come back, it does so smoothly. I'm not a huge advocate for like introducing too many new practices or supplements postpartum because I really think that like if given the right ingredients, right, the body's gonna do what it needs to do in its own time. But seed cycling is one thing that is really beneficial. It's essentially using the power of seeds because they have the ability to influence the way that our body naturally makes its own hormones, but it's gentle. It's just food, right?
Yeah.
So you can use seed cycling in any time of transition, whether that's trying to get pregnant or postpartum, getting off the pill even.
Yeah, I'd love to, I mean, I was going to get to seed cycling, so I would love to jump into seed cycling right now. And I'm also, one of my next questions is increasing your ways of getting pregnant. So if seed cycling helps with that too, I would love to know which seeds.
Yeah, so seed cycling can help you get pregnant. And when you are pregnant, flax seeds are like one of my absolute favorite foods. You didn't directly ask about this, but I just think the studies are, think the studies are insanely epic. And I don't know why no one's talking about it, but basically like studies that they've done, it's hard to do studies on pregnant women, like a lot of ethical concerns.
Yeah.
So it's very rare that we get studies on pregnant humans, but the studies that they've done on flax seeds and pregnant cows have shown that flaxseed use during pregnancy reduces miscarriage rates anywhere from 64 to 100%.
Wow.
Super awesome.
Yeah.
So anyway, if you're pregnant, use flax seeds. They also can help you get pregnant. So flax seeds are amazing. But basically with seed cycling, you start from the day you start bleeding is day 1 of your cycle. So day 1, you bleed, you use flax seeds and pumpkin seeds for 2 weeks for 14 days. And then this is assuming everyone, ovulates on day 14, which isn't necessarily true. But if you're trying to bring your cycle back or you're working through transitions, you also just like rotate on a 14-day basis. It's kind of like cross training your cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And so then on day 14, you switch to sesame seeds and sunflower seeds.
Okay.
Flax seeds, really like the first half of your cycle seeds are helping keep estrogen levels lower and setting your body up to be able to make more progesterone in the second half. And then the second half seeds are still helping lower progesterone a little bit, but are boosting progesterone. And so it's helping get us back into that like healthy balance.
Nice. Okay. I hadn't heard of seed cycling before, honestly, like following you. So, give me a second because I want to remember this one. Yeah. How much do you take?
2 tablespoons. And ideally you do them raw and freshly ground. So you would take like 2 tablespoons, 1 tablespoon of each seed, put them in a coffee grinder or a spice grinder, grind it up and like put it on top of your smoothie or whatever. Or honestly, when I was seed cycling, I would just like mix it in water and chug it down. Like,
yeah,
I didn't
just take it.
I didn't have the patience to like get creative with something every day. But you can. Yeah. And then for people who are like, okay, some of my clients love it. They're like, the ritual of it is super fun. And like, I wake up and I grind my seeds and I love doing that. And other people are like, you want me to do what every day?
Yeah.
So for those people, you can do a week's worth at a time and just stick them in a mason jar and put it in the freezer. And then we have a little mix that you scoop 2 tablespoons out of every day.
Nice. Yeah, that seems really doable too. What are the other benefits? So we talked about like fertility and like increasing your chances, but what else do people use seed cycling for?
Yeah, so I love it for like transitional hormonal moments. So like if you're entering menopause, if you're postpartum, if you're trying to get pregnant, if you're trying to get off the pill, because what it does is it kind of just, again, helps smooth out that like estrogen progesterone scale that we want.
Yeah, that we want balanced.
Right. And the seeds have phytoestrogenic properties, which influence the way that the body deals with their own hormones. And also they have a lot of great nutrients in it. So like vitamin E, for example, which is found in sunflower seeds, is really great for progesterone production. Zinc is really prevalent in pumpkin seeds, which is really helpful for testosterone regulation. So if it just kind of like overall helps level everything out.
Wow, that's really cool. The power of seeds.
Yeah, and especially like if you think about each seed is like has the potential to create life, right? And so it makes sense that they can influence our hormones.
Yeah, that's really cool to think about. And I think I could be wrong, but I know I hadn't heard of it before, so I'm excited to share that information because it sounds powerful.
And if you're gonna try seed cycling, you got to give it a minimum of like 3 to 6 months.
That's a good little side note, or I don't even know what I'm thinking of. That's good to add because I think sometimes people, including myself, like to try things out for like a week and then we're like, it's not working. And then we go off of it or something.
Exactly.
So that's good to know. All right. So now let's get into, natural ways of increasing your chances of getting pregnant. Also for men.
I haven't worked with men in a really long time.
That's okay.
But I do work with a lot of women who are trying to get pregnant, and we definitely talk about their husband's fertility too.
Okay, cool.
And like in one of my courses called Fertility Freedom Academy, there's a whole bonus module for like making the most of male fertility. So
nice. Definitely
it's something we need to address, especially because sperm rates are at historic lows and are estimated in 20 years. But by like 2045, I think it's estimated, the median sperm rate is going to be 0. Like it's actually like the biggest risk to our our population.
Humankind. Yeah, that's scary.
It's pretty wild. And the biggest factors are toxins in our environment and obesity, as where they're getting those numbers from. So it's definitely something like we should talk about for men too, but for women, I mean, there's a million things you can do. Like I said, I have a whole online course about it, but the one thing that I think is pretty obvious, but sometimes people just like don't think about, is treat your body like you're already pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
Like when faced with a choice of like, should I drink this? Would I eat this? Would I do this? Would you do it if you were pregnant?
Yeah.
And if the answer is no, then you shouldn't do it now when you're trying to conceive.
That's great advice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. What should, I mean, I guess some of the things we already know, like typical things, but what should a pregnancy diet look like? So we know certain things you shouldn't eat, but in your opinion, what are some things you think are beneficial?
Well, it's always funny because so I help a lot of women get pregnant, and then we work together for oftentimes while they're pregnant as well.
Mhm.
And it's so funny. There's like the people who are like, I can't eat anything. Like all I want is pasta and butter. And like, 2 months prior, they were eating like the most colorful, nourishing, like
Yeah.
insane, awesome diet. And now they're just like, all I want is pasta and butter, and I'm not going to do anything else. I'm just like,
Yeah.
what? I know you're nauseous, but come on, like the health of your baby.
Push through.
But the good news is that most of what your baby gets in terms of like nutrients actually comes from before you were pregnant. So like the first 3 months that you're pregnant, your body and the placenta is essentially drawing from like what you were doing pre-conception, which is why I stress a pre-conception diet that is like very nutrient dense, antioxidant rich, whole foods, anti-inflammatory, so much. And pre-conception is like even more important than once you're pregnant. But I do really love to stress like lots of leafy greens, lots of veggies, lots of bitter foods, and staying away from sweet foods as much as possible, because we actually have research that shows that what you eat when your baby is in utero will affect their taste buds. So like if you are just like, I'm pregnant and I can eat ice cream whenever I want, and like your baby's gonna have a super sweet tooth, and it's gonna like set them up with, from the get-go, like struggle, in terms of not liking bitter foods, or they might be a more picky eater. But if you're eating like lots of vegetables and like focusing on those bitter foods, which are better for us, right? We know that your baby is more likely to benefit from that later on as well.
Yeah, I think that's so funny because I just think about, because I mean, I haven't even thought about well, I haven't been pregnant, but I haven't thought about when I am pregnant, how what I eat will then affect their taste buds. But I think it's funny because a lot of times, I'm thinking of a specific mom pair, but I think a lot of times we with our children or people with children think like, oh, they're just like me. They also have a crazy sweet tooth, but in reality, it's like you gave them the sweet tooth. That's funny. That's good to think about.
Yeah, and like just nutrient density in general. I think sometimes when people are pregnant, I've just seen this firsthand. I have clients on both sides of the spectrum, and I'm usually able to rein them back in. But like when I first started working as a birth doula originally, I volunteered at a hospital in San Francisco. And this specific hospital was a public hospital. Almost everyone there was on public insurance and generally served like a lower socioeconomic, community in San Francisco than, all the tech people. And which is why like it was so beautiful and amazing to be able to be a volunteer doula there for women who wouldn't have otherwise been able to afford that.
Yeah.
And I remember my first birth there, the baby had a cleft lip. And when it came out, and I at the time was like, oh my God, like I thought that was really a big deal. And I was like upset and scared and all these things.
Yeah.
And everyone was so casual about it. And I was like, what is going on? And so of course, I talked to some of the midwives and they said like they're relatively common there. And then I started doing some research, and usually cleft lips or cleft palates are results of nutrient deficiencies from mom in the womb. And I thought it was just really interesting because there's like a lack of education, or we know more about food deserts and like how, socioeconomic status can impact in nutrition, in different cities in different ways. And it really reaffirmed for me like how much we need to spread the knowledge of like, I know you crave chips, I know you craving whatever, but like let's get you some dark leafy greens and some like high quality protein, because it really does impact baby.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, being a birth doula is probably a wild trip. That sounds such a cool job.
Yeah, I haven't practiced in a while, just because it's hard to be on call all the time,
Hmm.
and I have other commitments that makes it challenging, but I hope that one day in the future I'll be able to attend more births for sure.
Yeah, that sounds so fun. Um,
I feel like you would be a good birth doula. You've got like good energy for it.
you think so? Oh my gosh, that's so sweet. I would love to. Maybe I honestly am the kind of person I would just like to try everything in my lifetime. Like I just want to do like so many jobs. That's part of the
Honestly,
reason. I'm sorry.
well, I was just gonna say, like, honestly, if it interests you, even in the slightest, like, I'm pretty sure that my doula training cost like $800
Oh,
and
really?
was like 10 weeks. And, then you just like go out there and you volunteer and you go to births and like it's totally something that it's not like crazy out of reach for anyone who wants to try it. I highly recommend.
Wow, I had no idea. That's cool. I
Yeah.
might think about it. I would love for you to break down cycle syncing and uh let's see what else I wrote. Yeah, and how we can use it to benefit our productivity, our diet, our sex life, all the things.
All the things. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, we could have done like an hour-long podcast just on this.
I'm
So
so
for
interested in this too.
that.
Yeah. Honestly, I already know like there's going to be a day in the future where I'm like, "Hey Stephanie, please come back on." There's so much I could talk to you about.
Yeah, we can totally like each one of these questions could technically be like
Yeah.
a podcast. So cycle syncing, yeah, is like this insanely awesome way and tool that we can use to organize our lives as women that match up with the hormonal changes we experience every month. So
Yeah.
if you are a woman who is not on hormonal birth control and who is still menstruating, you probably feel pretty different throughout different times of the month. And like when I say that men feel the exact same hormonally every day, sometimes women are like, what? I can't even imagine
I
what that
can't.
feels like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Must
And
be nice.
I mean, but once you get into cycle syncing and you can like understand why the changes that are happening and like use them to your advantage,
Yeah.
I actually am like so grateful that I get to experience all of these seasons every
Yeah.
month.
It becomes pretty powerful, huh?
Yeah. And so like the best way to explain it is each phase has a season. And if anyone is familiar with Alyssa Vitti, I love her. Like she's amazing in terms of like so much gratitude for spreading so much goodness around cycle syncing. And I love her and I've learned a lot from her and I disagree with her about a few things. And one of those things, so if you're listening to this and you've read Woman Code or In the Flow and you like are familiar, my seasons are going to be different than hers and bear with me. I think mine make more sense, but whatever. Basically, so I like to think of each of these phases as different seasons. And let's start with the menstrual phase. Like the way that I like to think of the menstrual phase is autumn. It's your inner autumn. Think about like the shedding of the leaves, right?
Yeah.
Like it's the shedding of your uterine lining. And it's a time, not necessarily always in Southern California, but like around the world, autumn is a time where we like go inward a little
Mhm.
bit, right? It's starting to get a little bit colder. It's more like that reflective, like moody, but in a like witchy kind of way,
Yeah.
right? Like, think like not Thanksgiving, Halloween, right? It's like
Yeah.
it's that witchy intuitive time.
Yeah.
And so, really amazing practices while you're bleeding include like journaling and writing, keeping a dream journal, because basically what's happening is the right and the left side of your brain have more access to one another, which
Mm.
equals like a deeper female intuition. And so when you're menstruating, it's a really great time to get really clear on like, what is it that I want out of this month? Like, what are my goals? Who do I want to spend time with? What do I want to focus my energy and attention towards? And like taking time to rest and kind of like go into that, intuitive witchy
Yeah.
space. Um, I always think like too, it's like summer, like you're like traveling and doing a bunch of things and like you're gonna do that again in the winter for the holidays, but like fall's like the time to be at home, like spend time
Yeah.
with yourself, rest, relax, don't exercise too hard, etc. And then we move into winter, which is your follicular phase.
Mhm.
And I like to think of it as winter because things aren't dead, right?
Mhm.
They're just like living under the surface. And so your hormones slowly start to increase over this time. Estrogen is slowly rising over the course of your follicular phase. And as she does, so does your energy. But because hormone levels are relatively low in the first part of this phase, it's a very like clear-headed, focused time. So I like to think of it as like a blanket of, white snow on something. It's like very just like clear and pristine, and you're able to like brainstorm more effectively and, start to move more. You're starting to be a little bit like more planny and focused and, maybe even a little bit more social as the time goes on. So let's say, for example, I got really clear that I wanted to find a partner. I'm happily married, but let's say, for example, if anyone here, or babe, maybe I'm just kidding. Well, let's say I wanted to find a new partner, or I wanted to find a partner, and that's what I really got clear on. So that's like, figure that out in my intuitive phase. Maybe over my follicular phase, I would be like getting back on the apps. I would like make a list of all of the things that are really important to me to find in a relationship. I would start talking to some of my friends and being like, hey, who do you know that you can set me up with? Like I would be
taking more action.
Ready. Yeah, I'd be getting everything ready. Then comes ovulation, okay? Which is like the spring, right? So when you look at a tree, is the shedding of the leaves the main event, or is the bloom the main event?
The bloom.
Right. But so often women think that their period is the main event of the menstrual cycle, when actually it's not. Ovulation is. And it's just harder to identify. So that's a separate conversation, but like, how do you identify this phase, et cetera? But when you get to ovulation, so many amazing things are happening. This is like the highlight of the month. It's spring. We're coming out of like all of this. You're more articulate. People are more attracted to you. You're putting out pheromones. You actually have like a pinkness in your cheek. You have more energy. Everything is like, go, go, go. This is like the best time to go on first or third dates, to be like talking to more people, to be you're the life of the party. People are going to be more attracted to you. It's a good time to ask for a raise. You're able to really say what's on your mind really well. For example, if I was like, could plan exactly when I come on a podcast, I would come during my ovulation.
Yeah.
You're more horny during this time because you get a little kick of testosterone because your body's like, maybe let's get pregnant, right? That's what your body wants to happen. So you're a little bit hornier, and all of that kind of plays into this like 5 days of just, wow, right? Like I want some of that feeling when you see someone in her ovulation phase. And then we move into summer. And sorry, this is like a really long explanation.
No, I love this. I'm just thinking, man, women, like it's just so great.
Magic, right?
So freaking magical.
I love it.
Yeah.
And so then we move into summer, and summer is your luteal phase, wrongly called the PMS phase, because when everything is in balance, you actually don't have PMS. And so I really am frustrated with, everyone hating on the luteal phase all the time, because when everything is like balanced and right, she's beautiful. And it's a really great time. This isn't like, let's go crazy party summer. This is like a little bit of like the muggy summer that grandma came to visit. Okay. Where it's like, you guys stayed home a lot and you like did fun art projects and like you slept really well and watched good movies and like hung out with your best friends and, like reflected on all of the amazing things that happened in the past year, in the past month. Right. So it's like the organized time. So for example, let's say in this dating scenario, menstrual phase, I got really clear that I wanted a partner. Follicular phase, I got really clear on like who that person looks like. I start talking to people to be like, can you set me up with? I get on the right apps. I do all the things. I set up the dates. Ovulation phase, I go on the dates. I wow them. They're all like, hey, can I go out with you again? And then your luteal phase is when you look back and you're like, okay, now let's evaluate. I went out with Steven and he was like really good at this, but I don't know if I really liked that. And you kind of like clean everything up, right? And you're like, who am I going to go with round 2? And so it's a really awesome time for like reflecting and just being more inward. Some interesting things about this phase is I also like to think of it as summer, because what happens is your body heats up. So after you ovulate, your body starts producing progesterone, which increases your metabolism. So you just burn an extra like 80 to 290 calories a day by sitting on your butt, just like not doing anything. And your temperature spikes as a result. So that's an easy way to think about summer too. It's like it gets warmer. So your temperature spikes. Because of this, you need a little bit more complex carbohydrates. And that's going to help keep your mood more stable. And it's one of those things when women are like, oh, I'm so hungry the week before my period. That's why. But if we come into it with the knowledge of like, okay, I'm hungry because my metabolism is sped up, but not by that much, right?
Yeah.
Then we're not going to go and like
go crazy.
Yeah. And like, that's often what I see women caught up in this cycle where they eat really well in the first half of their cycle because their appetite's a little depressed and they don't need as much food. And then they like completely wreck all the progress that they made in the second half. But if we can mindfully know like, okay, 280 calories, like isn't that much. It's like 2 handfuls of almonds, you know?
Yeah.
Then we can monitor that and like really support weight management also throughout the month.
Yeah, that's helpful to know. I think also cycle syncing really helps with what kind of workouts you can do, because for a long time I was doing HIIT workouts like throughout the whole month. And then I realized that that's not what's healthiest for my body.
So HIIT workouts are great in ovulation and like, you know, maybe the second half of your follicular phase and the first half of your luteal phase, but like definitely not late luteal phase and, you know, menstrual phase.
Yeah. I would like to talk about, because you touched on it for a second, things that we have like normalized periods should be like, even though they shouldn't be like that.
Totally. Oh, that's like a very close subject to my heart. Like we just normalize painful periods like they're nothing. And that is part of what has to happen. And that's not normal. If you experience pain during your period, that is your body's way of crying for help.
Yeah. I think that's good to remind people of, because I actually feel like I've always had very mild periods, but I know people who have gone through like the most excruciating like pain during their periods. And it's like, man, like there has to be something, you know, and something other than birth control, because there's also effects with that too. So yeah, I always like to think about the ways that we have just like normalized it instead of like, I don't know, trying to figure out what the root is.
Totally. Yeah. So painful periods, PMS, not normal either. Like, yes, some increased sensitivity, you know, like maybe being a little bit more tender, but that's where cycle syncing comes into play. Because if I know that I'm going to be in my luteal phase and I'm going to be slightly more tender, then I'm not going to like do a review with my boss about my progress, you know, like you can schedule that for like at a time where you'll take that much better. But having like increased or like very massive mood swings is not normal. Feeling very irritable, very sad, none of that is normal. More like I'm watching a movie and like Marley and me is cute and I'm going to cry anyways and I'm going to cry a little harder, right? Like that's normal. But that, and then also like irregular bleeding. I see that a lot. Like, and people think that that's not irregular, but like spotting is not normal. Tender breast, not normal. What else? I think those are the biggest ones. Acne.
Yeah, that's good to know. Thank you. Thanks for breaking that down.
I'm glad that you've had mild periods throughout your life.
Man, I've been so lucky, so blessed about it. Yeah. I have felt cramps, but like honestly, like that more recently, I've been feeling cramps. But other than that, my life has been smooth sailing.
Are you more stressed recently?
I don't know, to be honest. I think like it's hard for me to say I'm stressed when I feel like I'm not working as much, but I'm sure there might be ways I'm stressed and just not realizing maybe.
Okay.
So yeah, any tips for just maintaining a healthy vagina? I was going to say vaginal, healthy vagina.
Don't eat too much sugar and refined carbs. And consider taking a women's blend probiotic because it really does impact like the health of your microbiome, impacts your vaginal microbiome. You know, pee after sex, like the
Yeah.
usual stuff. But as far as like vaginal microbiome stuff goes, really like eat fermented foods, maybe take a probiotic, and try to stay away from like super sugary and refined carbohydrate foods too often.
Nice. Thank you. What are some of your favorite resources regarding women's health?
Yeah, Dr. Jolie in Brighton is the best. I love her. She has a great book called Beyond the Pill. She also does amazing content on her Instagram regularly. Aliso Vitti is awesome. Flow is the name of her company.
Mhm.
And she's got some great books and resources too. Again, I don't fully like agree with everything that, like, we have slightly different philosophies, but she's a really awesome resource. And Aviva Romm is another favorite of mine.
Okay.
She's really cool.
I don't think I've heard of her yet. Yeah, I'd say the Flow app is helpful too if you're trying to cycle sync and make it a little easier for yourself. That's what I started on. Let's see. Where can our listeners find you at, Stefani?
Yeah, so Stefani with an F. And not a Y. People are always like, whenever I say Stefani with an F, they're like, oh, is it A-N-Y? I'm like, no, A-N-I-E. But so Stefanie, S-T-E-F-A-N-I-E, Adler, A-D-L-E-R, wellness on Instagram. And I spend a lot of time over there. So that's the best place to find me. You can also email me or find me on my website, Stefanie Adler Wellness. And yeah,
lots of great content from Stefani. Yeah, so follow her. Thank you so much, Stefani, for this.
Thank you, Kayla. This has been super fun.